here with His Excellency Ambassador Marc Franco, who's offered to answer some questions. And I shall go straight on with the first one, which is, how would you describe the relationship between the European Union, the African Union, and the Arab League? And precisely, what...
Stop for a minute. I don't know. Is
Yeah,
it that
wait.
you're trying to read? Just hold point
This is
in
for
front
you.
of you. Just hold it in your right hand if you're trying to read here. You got
Yeah.
me? I mean, you were doing this.
Okay.
All right, so just hold it.
Should I start everything from the
Of
beginning?
course, you have to start again.
Okay, wait.
All stars have to be.
Okay. We are here with
Stop,
this...
stop. Just look at him and just pause and then start. Don't say okay and then, because it's funny to cut. Okay, just pause.
And start.
Okay. We're here with His Excellency Ambassador Marc Franco, who's offered to answer some questions for us. The first one is about the relationship between the European Union, the African Union, and the Arab League, and precisely the Egypt's position, how much the Egypt's position towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict influences its relation with the EU. Actually, that's the second part of the question.
Okay. Now, as far as the relationship between the three institutions is concerned, of course, they are institutions of a very different kind. The European Commission is the executive body of a supranational organization and has supranational powers in a number of fields. That means that it's powers that have been transferred from member states to the European Union level, to the Commission in this case, like for instance in the case of competition regulations. The African Union has the ambition to go in that direction. They have set up also a commission and they try to act as the executive body of the African Union, but of course they do not at this stage have the supranational powers that the European Commission have. The League of Arab States is still of a different kind. They have not set up a commission. They have less ambition than the African Union in terms of being a governing body of their member states. They're more like a, I would say, political forum where Arab countries discuss and try to define common lines, common policies vis-à-vis problems of the region. The League of Arab States has been fairly inactive for a long time, but it has to be said that recently, with their positions on Libya and now with their position of Syria, they have got really their act together. They have been much more influential, they have much more decisive, and they have shown that even as a political forum, they can take decisions. Secondly, as far as the Egyptian position on the Middle East peace process is concerned, Egypt doesn't really have a very extreme position. It's not so far from the position of the European Union. Egypt talks to both partners. Egypt is one of the two Arab countries that have recognized Israel, so they have an embassy in Tel Aviv, and they have a dialogue with the Israeli government. Of course, they have also a dialogue with the Palestinian leaders, and in particular, as far as the Palestinian leaders is concerned, Egypt plays an important role in the reconciliation process, bringing Hamas and Fatah around the table and trying to make a common platform between the two, which is something where we, from the European Union point of view, really respect the contribution that Egypt is making.
Okay, thank you.
You're
doing the second one.
Another question is the following. According to you, which responsibilities and challenges arise from Egypt's historical and geographical position, standing, regarding Europe, Africa and the Middle East?
For Egypt?
Yes.
Egypt has a unique position on the map. Egypt is situated in between three continents. If you were looking for an example of what is a hub, Egypt is, I would say, a textbook example. That means that it is extraordinarily well placed to be the center of communications, and communications can be transport, can be energy, or can be telecommunications. This is an advantage that up till now Egypt has not been fully exploiting. Some examples, let me take the example, for instance, for transport. It has a Suez Canal. It also has an important airport. Nevertheless, Egypt has not engaged for the moment in what is called the open sky policy. That means that the monopoly of Egyptair on a number of lines, in particular on cargo, for instance, still hinders the development of the airport. Now, the short-term interest of any monopolist like Egyptair is to keep its monopoly because that gives it monopoly profits. The longer-term interest of the company and the longer-term interest of the country is, of course, the reverse. Out of liberalization of the airline policy, out of the conclusion of an open air agreement, I am absolutely convinced that a lot of interesting economic developments could follow for Egypt, because there would be much more cargo, there would be more opportunities, for instance, for agricultural products to be shipped to European markets. Now, products that now come from other African countries, but much further away from Europe. This is about beans, this is about flowers, this is about tomatoes and other products. On top of it, it could be a hub for transport for airlines going to Africa, airlines going to Asia. There is no reason why Dubai should be the hub for communications to Asia. It could very well be Egypt, which in a sense is better placed. So I'm just quoting a couple of examples where, by better exploiting the position of the hub, Egypt could have a development of transport, could have a development of industry, maintenance of airplanes, for instance, repair of airplanes, and all kinds of services that could be grafted upon this development of the airport.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And considering cultural diplomacy as a way to promote dialogue and enhance understanding between cultures, how could it be used to support such a mission?
Well, it hasn't anything to do right away with the hub function, let's say the place on the map, but cultural diplomacy vis-a-vis Egypt is certainly a link with the fact that Egypt is the most important Arab country. It has more than 80 million inhabitants, and is by far the most populous of the Arab countries, with a long history, and artistic history, and literature, and so on and so forth. And this positions, in fact, Egypt uniquely vis-a-vis the other Arab countries. There again, over the last decades, this position has not been extremely well used. I know that, for instance, Director Sarah Geldin of the Alexandrine, of the Alexandria Bibliothek, he is kind of actively working on this and trying to reinforce the role of Egypt, of thinking and writing in Egypt about Arab matters, Islamic matters, and make Egypt again a kind of a leader in the Arab world as far as the contemporary cultural, religious and other developments is concerned. That offers, of course, for the European Union a very good opportunity to build up relationships with that institution, like, for instance, the Alexandrina, with somebody like Ismail Serra Geldin, and with other movements in Egypt, because we should not limit ourselves to contacts with the official institutions. There is in Egypt a very active civil society movement dealing with all kinds of cultural manifestations, and there is a lot of scope for European organizations, also of a grassroots nature, to contact and to work together with the Egyptian counterparts, be it in music, visual arts, theater, dance. There are a large number of possibilities where a cooperation with European counterparts would greatly benefit the Egyptian partner, but also through the synergy, the European partner.
Hello, Ambassador.
Oh.
Okay. My question is, could Egypt be considered as a model within Africa? And I'm referring to this is in relation to the economic prosperity growth that Egypt relatively experienced, before the revolution, and also the revolution itself. Could this perhaps be some sort of influence? Can they perhaps influence states such as Côte d'Ivoire or Congo to take, some sort of stance against their respected governments?
Well, I think there's a lot of truth in the question you ask. The Egyptian macroeconomic policies of the last Mubarak government, the Nazif government, have been pretty efficient. They have liberalized and opened the economy, and the results are clearly seen. Growth rates of about 7%. The trade over about 5 years have multiplied by a factor 3. Investments have multiplied by a factor 4. So the reserves of the central bank reached a very high level, equivalent to about 9 months of imports, which is quite extraordinary. The economic policies at the macroeconomic level, I think, could serve as an example in terms of creating a regulatory framework, modernizing the legislation, and having policies that stabilize the economy. Where the country went wrong and where it should not be a model is the fact that redistribution was not really on the agenda. There was not a focus on poverty alleviation policies. The development was macroeconomic but did not filter down to large parts of the population. And secondly, more generally, the macroeconomic model was orthodox, but it was not a capitalist model. You can call it crony capitalism. It was a development of capitalism that benefited in the first instance a small group of people around the sons of the president, Gamal and Allah Mubarak. That kind of determined what was going on in the economy and who benefited and who did not benefit. And as in many of these countries, it's those that politically are in charge that determine who gets the economic spin-off, the economic benefits, and the small group of people around Gamal and Allah Mubarak have benefited extraordinarily with quite impressive levels of wealth and increase of wealth. And that certainly is not an example for other African countries. As far as the revolution is concerned, and the overthrow of the regime, Egypt followed the example of Tunisia, so you could ask the question whether the example of Tunisia should be followed. It's difficult to say. I mean, every country has to handle these problems of democracy and democratization in its own way, and I don't think export of this kind of models is possible. Nevertheless, I think it is a clear indication for all authoritarian, autocratic leaders in the region or in Africa that they should never count on a regime that continues eternally, that there is a day of reckoning coming, and that one day they will pay the price for all the abuses and the authoritarian character of their rule. So I don't think it's a model that can be copied. But I think it's certainly the writing on the wall that is important. I mean, all autocratic rulers should remember that their rule is not eternal.
Thank you. I will now more focus on Africa. In light of a recent Deutsche Welle article, it's been noted that land grabbing is potentially bad for states unless it truly works in their interest. Coupled with the volatility of foodstuff prices, it quite plausibly increases the chance of having a very upset population, as Uganda clearly shows. Can conflict rise easily from such results, and how could it be best avoided or dealt with in the future?
What do you call land grabbing?
Land grabbing. You don't know about this? Land grabbing, when a country is buying land from another country.
Okay, no.
Land grabbing.
This is some of the Arab countries, China, buying up lots of land.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a bad solution. I mean, it is a solution to a problem of rural development, but I think it's a bad solution because it does not take into account an important dimension of the problem of development in Africa, and that is the problem of population and grassroots movements. And one should never forget that the large part of the population in Africa still lives in subsistence agriculture, and chasing them from the land with whatever compensation is heading for disaster. Which doesn't mean that agriculture could not be modernized. I do indeed think that the development of Africa goes through the development or modernization of agricultural practices, and that the subsistence agriculture that exists now and that feeds many people is not a feasible or a long-term durable sustainable solution because of low productivity and so on and so forth. I mean, and with land pressure it's certainly not going to give results. I mean, agriculture has to be modernized, but I don't think that land grabbing is the best solution for that problem.
Okay. Regarding this, I have another question. So, this happens because of the lack of property rights that exists throughout the African continent. Do you see a need for foreign governments to act on a more moral level with regards to the interests of the countries they are dealing with, or is it solely the target country's responsibility to implement the rules that avoid such circumstances in the first place?
I mean, basic principle for me, as I say in French, on ne peut pas faire le bonheur des autres. Every country has to make its own happiness. It's up to the country to decide what it allows, what it doesn't allow. Foreign interference doesn't help. There is no country that has ever been developed by an outside country. If countries develop, it's because they did it themselves. They pulled themselves up with their own bootstraps. They invested, they did what they had to do. And then, in that case, foreign assistance comes in and helps. Foreign assistance that comes in a country where the government does not have a clear policy and does not use the resources well is not going to help anything. So I can only stress that it is the responsibility of the government. The government should take up this responsibility and do whatever it needs to do. This goes for land grabbing, for property rights, redistribution policies, anti-poverty policies, and so on and so forth. It's not outside governments that can influence this. If just perhaps as an illustration on this in this respect. Putting foreign assistance in perspective. Since about 15 years, the level of poverty has, in numbers, drastically decreased in the world, right? By about, I think it's about 300, 400 million people are less below the poverty line. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's only in two countries that it happens, it's China and India. And China and India had policies to combat poverty and had special programs to do this. Now, China and India are countries that have hardly any foreign assistance. In another piece of bad news, as in Africa, the number of poor people has increased, despite the high level of assistance and the increasing level of resistance. So, a bit simplistically, you can say that there is an inverse economic relationship, or statistical relationship between the level of assistance and the level of reduction of poverty. The more assistance you get, the more poverty you get. Of course, it's not true, but it points. I mean, it's a sophism, but it points to one important thing, that it does not depend on foreign aid whether you reduce poverty or not. It only depends on the poverty of on the policy of the government and the programs, the well-targeted programs that it implements.
May I ask you another question, actually related to your speech before? I was curious. You were mentioning that, like, all these uprising revolutions, like the Arab Spring or what happened in Libya and everything that's happening now in Africa, have been all like not really organized revolution. That's why they didn't work.
Well, the success was one thing.
To get away
the immediate follow-up is another one, right? I mean, the revolution will continue, because what has been done in Egypt is irreversible. But what has been done is perhaps not what you think. The form of Mubarak in itself is then perhaps not important. What is important is fear has fallen away. Egyptians are no longer afraid, right? There were perhaps 100,000, 200,000 people in Tahrir, but there are 85 million Egyptians who are no longer afraid. They're no longer afraid of the police. They're no longer afraid to go to the streets, to strike, to protest, to manifest, to occupy offices and things like this. They're no longer afraid of the police. Police is afraid of them. That means that whatever happens now in the short run, this absence of fear is going to continue. And that's why even if now there might be a setback for reforms, it will happen again.
But is that enough to change something?
I mean, change will take years. I mean, it's an illusion to think that it happens overnight. I mean,
no, but you can destroy something in 1 minute and then to
no, I mean, the thing is that population, the population is no longer afraid, and if they don't like it, they go back to the square, and it will be a black revolution. That's not going to go away, but it takes time. I mean, look let's take the example of Central European countries. When they introduced, I mean, this was a change between plan economy and market economy, right? People thought that it would be bliss the moment it changed, that everybody would be driving around. I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit. This reformist parties won. I mean, the reformed communists didn't stand any chance. It was the liberals who won the first elections. Such a disaster in the economy in the first 4 years that they didn't get any votes anymore. And everybody went back. In the meantime, the communist parties have transformed some of the socialist parties. The socialist parties have become reformist. They had put together their economic programs and things like this, and they became more credible. And then there's a kind of an alternance between one and the other until in the end. But it takes time for these things to happen. The same will happen in Egypt. You have a change from an authoritarian regime to a democratic regime, and from crony capitalism to capitalism, right? It's also a double change. The change from crony capitalism to capitalism is less painful because all the countries are basically market economies. The basic legislation is a market economy legislation. Can be improved, can be made better, can be more performant, many things need to be done, red tape has to be cut, public administrations has to be reformed, and so on and so forth. But we will never see in North Africa the drop of GDP by 40%. I mean, even in the worst of times, GDP in Egypt, I think, fell for half a year by 1 or 2%. So over the whole fiscal year, the growth 10-11 was, I think, still 1% positive, right? So it's not economically, it's easier, and you don't have this dramatic drop in GDP that you had in Central European countries when you went from plan to market. It's not necessarily so that the process will be quickly over, because crony capitalism is difficult to extract, because there are some things that you need to leave and some things that you need to take out, and there is corruption to fight, because crony capitalism goes together with deep-seated corruption in the whole system that starts at the top. So that's not an easy task. And as far as the political change is concerned, from the authoritarian to a democratic state, the problem is that, in fact, the elites of the regime are still in place. They haven't changed. Whereas in Central Europe, there was a kind of a clean swipe of the elites of the regime that was taken out, including the security forces, and in particular security forces. Now, in Egypt, there has been a reform of the security forces, but basically, it's still the same people, right? And it will take a new government with a new parliament to do a real cleanup. So there has been a dismantling of services, there has been a reform of services, but it has not been as dramatic as, for instance, what Germany has done against the Stasi, or what the Czechs have done against their secret service, or the Poles, and so on and so forth. The people are still in place. And it is one part of the administration where you can't get a grip on. I mean, we proposed several times, not just we, but the French, the Brits, the Americans, to have what's called the security sector reform. We're not allowed in. We're not allowed inside the ministry. Now, just to finish this, the parliament will have a large, possibly an absolute majority of Muslim brothers. Muslim brothers know the security services very well because they suffered from them. Muslim Brothers was the main target of the security services because it was the only existing political movement of any importance during Mubarak days. They were the only competitor for political power. So the security services really targeted the Muslim Brothers. They went to prison, they were beaten, they were tortured, they were killed, right, for decades. So if the Muslim Brothers will be the majority in parliament and will be in the government and will have the Ministry of Interior, you can be sure they will reform the security services because they know it from inside, from having been there, beaten, tortured and killed. Right? So that's one of the, let's say, interesting spin-offs of the election, that Muslim Brothers will certainly take it in hand to clean up that service.
I would like to thank you again for your time and for your answer on behalf of the ACD. Thank you.